Hello, and welcome to episode 101 of Retro Encounter, the RPG fan podcast where we play older games. I'm your host, Caitlin Argyros, Link is all on the board, and it's been a while since I've done a normal Retro Encounter episode, but I had to be here because this month we are playing Final Fantasy XII, my absolute favorite Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy I will defend unto death, but I don't defend it alone because I am joined by two awesome friends of mine. We have Peter Dem Abs Triezenberg.
Them abs indeed, although they don't look as weird in this version. Peter Triezenberg, I have Fury on the boards. How's it going, everybody?
And Robert, I'll Zodiac Your Age Fenner.
Whoa! RPG fans' very own Marquis de Sade here. Pleased to be here, Towns Carmarty on the boards.
So, somewhere Rob just got a nosebleed, whatever. Every time we say Marquis, Rob feels pain.
Don't believe Andor's lies.
I'm Captain Bosch
Of Dalmasca.
Oh my god, that's the
what
best.
a treat! That has aged so wonderfully.
I forgot how funny that part was.
It was amazing, especially when no one listens to him. Like, you get one person heard you, and you're sad face.
You accidentally say it within earshot of one of the guards, and then your whole thing just goes down, and it's like, no.
Nope. Okay, so, like I said, really excited that we are playing and talking about Final Fantasy XII, since it has a very special place in my heart. So I thought that we would start this episode, of course, sort of discussing what our history is with the game, because I think all of us are playing the remaster, the Zodiac Age. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm a purist.
Oh.
No, I'm lying. I'm playing the Zodiac Age.
We've all played the original, though, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So, how has it been going? What was your impression of the original game when it came out, and how are you feeling it now that we're playing this beautiful remaster?
Speaking for myself, I didn't play 12 when it first came out. I played it a couple years later. I kind of went through this kick in high school where I played through the whole Final Fantasy series in reverse order. So I played 13 when it came out, and then 12, and then 10. I really enjoyed it at the time, although it was a little slow paced. It took me, I think, about 3 months to time, and that was when I was in high school and I actually had free time. And I remember at the time I was kind of on the I liked it well enough, but I was kind of on the fresh off of the it's just Return of the Jedi. But playing it now, I'm really appreciating it a lot more, and the small fixes and stuff they make in Zodiac Age really smooth out the experience. Fast forward button. It's everything I ever wanted, and I never ever want to play a game without it again.
Hashtag every RPG should have a turbo button.
Exactly.
Yeah, for real.
And especially because we might get into this later, but I think 12 is a fairly grindy game. It's not too bad compared to some, but it's still there's a lot of I tend to gravitate towards running around and fighting a lot of enemies because I want to get that loot so I can get that gil so I can get better equipment and pay for license points.
I think there's a kind of satisfying rhythm to the grind in this game. It feels like you're doing more than just padding, because you've got those cool encyclopedia entries that you unlock by defeating enough foes, and just the speediness and just being out in that big semi-open world. I think it lends itself very nicely to the formula in ways that other grindy RPGs don't necessarily.
Yeah, and the game actively rewards you for doing it. The loot drops get better the more of the same type of enemies you kill. And you're always getting license points, which again, we'll get into that. It's one of the 12's biggest innovations is its level up system. But it's just, even at its grindiest, 12 always feels like it's always a rewarding gameplay experience. That's what I'm finding, at least.
So, Rob, what's your history with the game?
I played when it was current. I think I just quit my job and I went to university, and with my last paycheck, I think I bought Final Fantasy XII and an Xbox 360. So I was kind of going between the two, alternating. But around the time that Final Fantasy XII came out, honestly, my interest in the Final Fantasy series was waning. 10 didn't do a lot for me. I actually spoke to Peter in a previous podcast and saying that the PS3 remake collection like really brought me around on that game. But my first impression with 10 was not good, and I didn't have a computer good enough to run 11. So I was like, well, maybe the series just isn't for me anymore. But I bought 12 just to see like how different it was, because I was hearing such interesting things out of Japan. And I was pretty blown away by it. I was like, this is bar none some of the best like writing and dialogue that the series has ever seen, and maybe any JRPG has ever seen. So I absolutely loved it. I kind of found the gamut system a little bit confusing, and to this day I still do. I'm not so great at configuring my characters, but I don't know. Like, I don't think that the world building is quite on par with that of Matsuno's other games, and I think maybe a part of that is of Kawazu taking over partway through. But
guy.
I do think. Yeah, I'm very much the same opinion of you, Caitlin. I think this is a triumph of Final Fantasy. So I'm really, really thrilled to be playing it again with all the prettying up and the revised job system and that delightful fast forward button that we're also fond of.
Ah, you were a man after my own heart. With your bottom dollar even?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So let's see. For me, I was in Japan on my junior year abroad when the game came out, in Japan, that is. Nice. So I already had a Japanese PS2, which I embarrassingly bought because I really wanted to play Dirge of Cerberus, and I just couldn't wait, and I kind of regret that. But I didn't regret getting 12 and playing through it in Japanese, even though I was only 3 years into the language, so I didn't understand everything. I mean, I followed enough to play the game, but then I, of course, had to buy it again when it came out in the States. And I'm of the mind where I'm always aware of its shortcomings. I never try to be one of those people that just, like, whitewashes the problems the game has. But I also can't deny the fact that despite all of those issues, there's something really compelling about the world and the game, and even the cast being somewhat weird and a little weak at times, there's something that I just keep coming back to, these characters and this world and this particular iteration of Ivalice in particular, that I when people say, what's your favorite Final Fantasy? It's still to this day probably the one that I would say. And I mean, that's hardly surprising because everyone knows I go left and right about this game. But I was also really stoked to see it finally get the HD treatment, or the re-release treatment. And Zodiac Age is a brilliant way to reintroduce the game, I think, to people that have played it before, or maybe, looked at it and then sort of stepped aside. I've seen so many people who have said that they played the game when it first came out and they didn't like it, they couldn't stand it, and they're coming around on it now and they actually really enjoy it. And whether that's because of the changes that Zodiac Age made, or if it's just about people, as we get older and we have more experiences and we come back to things that we saw or played when we were younger, and suddenly we have a different impression of them because age and experience changes a lot of viewpoints over time, or both. Maybe it's because I don't want to diminish the fact that Zodiac Age is an amazing treatment for this game, especially for really all of us in the States and in the West. If you didn't import the International Zodiac job system, this is your first experience with the job system having been implemented, having to select jobs for characters and being locked into those jobs, and that kind of changes things a lot too. So this sort of moves us into our next topic, which is specifically the Zodiac Age. Can't really get away from talking about this new re-release because we're all playing it. So let's just go and kind of talk about, how does Zodiac Age really change the experience? Is there anything that we actually kind of miss from the original? What are your thoughts? Peter, I'll start with you.
Well, I've already mentioned the fast forward button, so that basically makes the whole game for me. Like you said, it is the first time we've gotten to experience the Zodiac job system, which is I think it fixes a huge problem from the original game, which was the license board system in the original game was uniform across the whole party, which kind of meant that you kind of had a general like this is the best way to build your characters. And I know some people enjoy that. I guess it does sort of simplify things, but it kind of made everyone feel a little indistinguishable from themselves, other than their quickenings and whatever.
It's the Final Fantasy VI problem.
Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, even 6, at least you had some like unique elements to them, or you could like 12 was probably the most uniform of any game in the series, in my opinion, at least. The Zodiac system changes that by forcing you to pick a job class, essentially. So there's some classic Final Fantasy classes, and some that have been given a more evil-y spin, like your time mages or your white mages. They're called battle mages now, and that's awesome. But you're locked into that unique license board for them, and it kind of forces you to pick and choose. And then in the Zodiac Age, you can dual class, and it's awesome. Also, summons aren't useless anymore. Congratulations, Square.
Yeah, I've been having fun actually using the Espers this time around.
Right? Because they can like keep themselves alive. They all have a heal spell, so they can like.
They didn't before, did they?
No, you couldn't manually control them at all in the original, I don't think, and they would just die like instantly. So you never used the Espers, even though there are so many of them in this game.
And they're so cool and different from the previous couple rounds of Final Fantasy summons that we've had.
They're so cool, and they have such interesting lore, and that's a great thing about 12. That's just going back to like the kind of the history of the game. Like I didn't appreciate at the time when I played this how like well thought out this game's setting and lore is. It's amazing. The Espers all have this kind of cool little like revenge against the gods thing going on, and I'm just like, oh, Matsuno, you poor crazy man. Were you trying to tell us something? Is Square Enix mistreating you in any way? Show me where they touched you.
Oh, I wonder.
I mean, he did leave for health reasons, quote unquote.
Give Matsuno all the money.
Yeah, true. Bring him back for.
Yes.
He's coming back for 14, but.
Oh, I can't wait for that raid. I would love, though, Final Fantasy XII uncut or director's cut version of 12. We could see his original vision, because it sounds, I mean, like, you wonder how much of the game that we got is actually in that vision, because one of the biggest changes was, of course, that Bosch was supposed to be the main character, and they had to rework that because of how audiences sort of reacted to that. Which I find myself wondering, Bosch is only 36 years old. He's not exactly old by anyone's standards, but there is sort of that trope in Japanese media where that's old. Like if you're over 30, you're old in Japan.
Plus you are kind of like marketing the games to a teenage audience. Like, I mean, middle and high school age.
Well, I do wonder how much that may have changed. I'm not at all keeping up with the trends in anime and the games that we do not get that come out in Japan. So I don't know if I have any reason to hope that maybe they might be more accepting of an older protagonist.
Does not
of course,
seem like
certainly,
it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fool's hope, I suppose. But as we get older, I certainly appreciate older characters more, and it gets a little bit hard to relate to protagonists that are teeny boppers, and you're like, oh, the only thing you have to worry about is who said what at school, and I'm like, those were the days.
I said it before, I'll say it again. Make another Persona game with adult characters.
Oh yeah, bring back the detective guy. I was going to say though, I actually did have a brief experience with the original Zodiac job system version, because a friend of mine imported it and hacked his PS2 so we could play Japanese games. Yeah, so that was interesting. He had like the special like collector's edition, like steelbook box and everything. So he was very proud of that, and so he's been pretty hyped about Zodiac Age, because he's like, finally, you all get to experience it.
Yeah, I was, I don't know, I never felt particularly bothered by the sameness of the original license board. I mean, I get the criticism, of course. I mean, I had all 6 of my characters had, pretty much every kind of white magic, and they were all healing and back and forth, and it was fabulous. But I mean, it didn't super bug me, but I definitely feel coming into Zodiac Age that I like the strategy that having the jobs and being restricted to those jobs has introduced into the game, especially being an Evilise game, being sort of a prequel, if you will. to tactics, having that sort of job connection and dual jobbing in particular, because that was always a really fun strategy thing. When tactics was figuring out how to pair up jobs to make the ultimate beast of a character. But definitely with 12, Zodiac Age, figuring out who do I want to have what job to make sure, like, for me, it's important that I have most of my characters able to heal, so spreading out the white magic, but then also trying to figure out good combinations of jobs that work well. And then for me, I challenged myself to not only use every job, so that meant that there could be no overlap. Every job had to get used, so we couldn't have two people with white magic or two black mages, for instance.
I did that.
But I also, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I tried to pick job combinations that fit the character, fit the lore, maybe fit the weapon that they use. Like I had to make Balthier a machinist, even though he has the slowest gun animation, because I cannot imagine a Balthier that does not use guns.
You can't see it, but I'm nodding profusely.
So, I mean, that's a great, I think, addition to the game. Obviously, it addresses the sameness issue from the original game, but it also brings in that sort of strategy. And it's been great fun to see people theory crafting about the most optimal job combinations, but then also presenting their opinions of what works best from a lore perspective for the characters. And of course, the turbo button is a great help. It's great that they finally removed that BS with the Zodiac Spear. If you pick the wrong item boxes, you're screwed out of this weapon that you can't get to until like 30 hours later into the game. That's change. Great. Yeah. Fixing the Espers was great. If there's one thing that I really, really miss, though, it's that they took away the Sky Pirates Den from the original
You and me
game.
both. I was so hyped to see that again and so sad that it wasn't there.
Yeah, and I mean, ostensibly the reason why is that those were trophies in the original game before trophies were a thing, and this version, Zodiac Age, has trophies, and I suppose they were concerned that once you got those trophies, you would just automatically have all of the sprites in the Sky Pirate Den if you started a new game. Having said that, I think they could easily have jury-rigged something where the Sky Pirates Den isn't linked to trophies and is rather just linked to your progress within that playthrough, because that's how the original version had to work.
Just set some flags.
You do what Diablo 3 does on console too, where it's like some of them are tied to trophies, but a lot of the achievements are just like there's hundreds of achievements in Diablo, but only like a couple dozen are tied to the trophies. So
yeah, I think you're only allowed to have so many on PlayStation, because I mean, Binding of Isaac did the same thing, where that game's got something like over 100 Steam trophies. They've cut it down to something like 40 on PS4, but the rest are just like kind of internal screens.
And then Undertale had to like come up with like a bunch of like bogus ones in order to fill it out.
But yeah, that's a sad loss, because that was super cute in the original version, having this little isometric, Tactics X-esque sort of space, and you would get little sprites as you either beat certain bosses or you killed a certain number of monsters or got a certain number of gil, and when you would hover over them, they would animate. It was so cute. So
a little private diorama.
I miss that, and but I mean, that's the one major loss of this version. I will take it if it means having this beautiful game on my PS4. Rob, anything you want to add in terms of like Zodiac Age changes, things you liked, didn't like?
I mean, mostly you guys have. My thoughts are mostly synonymous with yours. One of the other things I miss was the sort of sketch look of the bestiary. But I mean, I guess the trade-off is having like the sprites that you can rotate and watch animations of, and that's a cool trade-off. But I like the more kind of, it was like you were looking at a grimoire previously.
Yes.
So I felt like maybe like a little bit of flavor was lost there. But that's such a minor complaint. It's really great to see this game getting a second chance. It was so divisive at the time, and it's like almost like complete positive reception now, and that's just so nice to see. And like I'm wondering like if it was a time and place thing, because I mean it came out It originally came out, like a month before the PS3, and then it was like one of the few PS2 games that was incompatible with the backwards compatibility. So I think like a lot of people felt soured on that. But
it was?
Yeah, it was one of the few.
Oh, you mean like for the emulated backwards compatibility?
No, and the hardware was in it as well.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I've been able to play it on my my fully backwards. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I mean, it looks like crap, of course.
Okay,
that's why I don't play it.
Maybe it was just glitchy and then just not compatible with the emulation.
I wouldn't be surprised. There are some weird, like you couldn't play Tales of the Abyss.
That PS2 version of Grandia 2, which is already like a really buggy port, like gets even worse.
Oh boy.
It like loses most of the textures.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's gross. I think in regards to 12's reception, it's like I think there kind of is a Final Fantasy cycle, and it's not as pronounced as something like Zelda or Sonic. There's a tremendous amount of hype for the game when it comes out. It drops, everyone like starts bagging on it, like it's the worst thing ever. Series is ruined, and then rinse and repeat every time a new game comes out. But I think 12 in particular just came out at this sort of weird juncture where since 12 came out, we've had games like Xenoblade and other like more open real-time RPGs.
I think Xenoblade owes a big debt of gratitude to Final Fantasy XII. Although it has its own spin on it, and it's great. 12 was the first thing that came to mind when I played Xenoblade.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things where it's like it's weird to think about, but maybe for real, maybe when 12 came out, a lot of people just weren't ready for it. Like you come off of 10, which is like about as traditional turn-based as you can get, and even that was kind of a big departure for the Final Fantasies beforehand. And now all of a sudden you have like real-time combat and these open spaces and this almost Shakespearean tone to the story, and it just like maybe it was a lot to take in. I don't know. It's kind of weird thinking about it back then. My like only like real complaint back in the day was Vaan is a terrible protagonist and the plot is Star Wars. But I mean, it's fine. That's Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. There are Star Wars.
That's hardly like a something to complain about. It's it's weird to think about.
I think you're onto something, and I think part of the reason why it's weird to look back on it now and think about why the reception was the way it was is because a lot of the things that 12 did, it was kind of pioneering, and now those things are commonplace or even expected in games. Like the idea of, for instance, the idea of no overworld map that you traverse, but you just go from area to area and you have MMO-like zones. That's a thing now that is more accepted. It's just like, oh, your game doesn't do that? That's kind of weird. The real-time combat, more and more games are getting rid of the transition to a separate battle screen and having the combat be on just the same screen. So that's a thing. I feel like the story itself, people weren't maybe ready for the more serious tone of the story, and for it to not have a sort of anime romance subplot, because that's a thing that Final Fantasy was doing in every previous iteration, at least on PlayStation anyway. And I've seen comments to that effect, like, that wasn't what I wanted from Final Fantasy. And that's, I feel, part of the whole, as you get older, you come back to these things and your tastes change.
We like the familiar.
I mean, I still like the games that I played when I was 12, but I wouldn't probably have liked this game when I was 12 because I was younger and I hadn't quite, matured my tastes enough. And mature makes it sound like, oh, you had to be mature to enjoy this game. But I do feel the themes of the game were of a more, I don't want to say higher caliber, but they were definitely aiming for a bit more high fancy, serious Game of Thrones type sort of drama, and that wasn't what people were expecting coming off of Final Fantasy X, a game that was much more character focused, much more focused on the love story between the characters and that sort of typical anime, go out and save the world kind of story. Yeah. And I think now that we've experienced things, in other games, but also on TV and in movies that we're kind of a little bit more conditioned to say, hey, this is kind of cool.
It's funny you mentioned that because you remember X-Play on G4?
Yes.
Yeah, they gave 12 a perfect score, and one of their positive points was no love story. And I look back on that review, and I'm just like, man, Adam Sussler had this figured out like a decade ago.
Yep.
I'm not adverse to a love story. It's just Final Fantasy love stories are usually just so ham-fisted and nonsensical.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah,
but I mean,
I love good romance.
It's funny. Final Fantasy's best romance is the most understated one in the series. It's like canon. It's Zidane and Dagger. No one ever talks about that one. It's all Squall and Renoa, and it's like they're terrible.
Yeah, I didn't. That was one of my problems with 8 was I just didn't feel it. But that is a conversation for maybe another day.
I just ignored all that stuff and concentrated on the nice architecture.
Well, so let's move along then. Because we are, of course, playing Zodiac Age and we have to make decisions about who's getting what job, I thought we might want to talk briefly about what did we end up picking for our cast of characters? What jobs did you end up picking, and what roles do you have your different 6? There's only 6 of them. It seems weird to say 6, only 6 party members, but that's also becoming the norm. What roles do the characters play for you in the game? Rob, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. Now that it's got this dedicated job system, I thought, you know what? A lot of these games they try to make the ladies into the healers, and I was not having that this time. And I've multi-classed Vaan to be a white mage as well as is it Shikari? Is that the thief class?
Yeah, or ninja or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So I've got my guys except for Bosch playing support. And I've got my ladies doing some heavy damage. Penelo gets a bad rap. I think maybe rightfully so. She doesn't really seem like she's got much interaction with the main plot. So I've made a conscious effort to make her into like a powerhouse Bushy, and she's just like running around assassinating everything with a katana, and she's like my main tank at the moment. And
wow.
Like recontextualizing that character into being like an unstoppable force, giving me a lot of pleasure in this playthrough.
Man, Vagamnon didn't know what hit him.
Heck no. But yeah, that's about it really. I've got everybody pretty evenly spread out. I'm trying to use all of the jobs. I haven't decided who I want to multi-class as a monk yet. I'm not even sure if I'll use that class. I'd quite like to. Yeah, I've got everybody at least, having one melee class and one spell class. But my beef is I just don't know what I'm doing with these gambits. I'm just constantly like switching characters and micromanaging when I really shouldn't have to be doing that, and it's just because I'm an idiot.
I find this is it for gambit setup. I like to have charge for all my magic users. I like to have charge as the primary ability. So when they run out of MP, they just automatically start. They automatically try and get some more.
Now, see, you're smart. I would never have thought of that.
I think I did that in the original version, and I remembered to do that here. So my priority list is so just as an example, you'll have ally hits KO, raise is the highest priority, followed by ally hits less than 50% Cura, followed by ally hits less than 30% Curaga, and then after that do self MP less than 10% charge. That way they'll be healing and raising until they're at the absolute lowest amount of MP they can, and then they'll get more MP as soon as they can. And then put attacking as a very low priority. Because,
secretly coming on this show to steal your tactics.
I'll send you screenshots of my gambit zones. Honestly, I think I'm not that. I don't think I'm not quite as good at min maxing out everything. I made Basha a knight and a time mage, and I'm just how do I even make a setup that would make some of the time mage abilities work useful?
Most of them aren't.
Yeah, it's I really the only reason I wanted to make him a time mage was I wanted Hestiga, and I'm I'm basically just grinding points to get haste and Hestiga, and it's well, okay, I guess he has gravity. That's kind of useful sometimes. Ash is a foe breaker and a white mage, so she can hit things with a hammer and heal people. She's a paladin.
Mm-hmm.
Balthier is a machinist, because guns, and a black mage.
Oh yeah, me too for Balthier.
Yeah, I think that's a good combination. I think because then just and set elemental weaknesses for all his spells. It makes up for the slow reload time. Fran is an archer and an Ulan, the spear user. I'm using her the least because honestly, I don't really think I just feel like everyone else does their job better.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I wanted to keep her as an archer because that's kind of her thing.
It's so in line with her character. I couldn't imagine taking away her bow.
Yeah. So like, even though I'm leveling her up as an Ulan, I'm just like, unless I get the Zodiac Spear, I'm never like giving you anything else. Just like Vaan is a Bushi and a Shikari, so he can do katanas and ninja swords. Pinello is a red battle mage and a monk.
That seems like a good pair of classes for her.
Yeah, so she can catch magic and cast magic, hit things with a mace, and punch things really hard if she decides to. I also don't use her very much, but I've been trying to keep people more evenly leveled. One of my small criticisms of 12, I never enjoy games where like there's no like reserve XP for party members, and I know it's kind of nitpicky, but I tend whenever I'm grinding, I try to like switch out for my lower level characters and try and keep them at an even keel with everybody else. But I do wish that they had like a little bit of reserve XP. At very least, everyone gets license points. So that's
better than nothing.
Mm-hmm, yeah, so you can kind of at least give everyone the abilities they need.
My strategy was always, and this was the same with the original version, but also with this one, was to go like in spurts of 5. So I'll level one group up to like, say, right now I'm right around level 30. So I'll level my current group to 35, and then I'll switch out and I'll level the other group to 35.
Right.
Doesn't always work out nice and neat with this version because obviously specific people have specific roles and jobs. And like, for instance, I try to make sure that I have someone who can steal in my party at all times to maximize loot drops. Since right now the only 3 people who can steal are Vaan, Balthier, and Fran, I kind of have to have them in the party a lot in order to do that. And then it's also based on who's got access to the best cure magic. So right now I'm running a party where only Ash can cure, and she doesn't have a multi-target heal yet. Right. So that's been a little bit tricky, but when I switch in, say, Fran, I have her on Red Battle Mage and Archer, so she's got some white magic, and then Vaan, who's my Shikari White Mage combo, to heal. Which is, that's the one little, I had to make a concession. I was trying to make every job fit the character, and White Mage doesn't really fit Vaan. It's something that people usually, I think to throw on Pinello more often, but I really wanted Pinello to have black magic and to be a monk because it's the closest job to her actual profession of being kind of a dancer. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had to make the concession. And the reason why I was originally going to have Balthier be a machinist white mage, because machinist white mage is a really good combo. A lot of going back and forth. Machinist benefits white mage, and white mage benefits machinist and whatnot. But Balthier's kind of a shitty healer because he's got some of the lowest MP and magic totals. He and Bosch are really kind of the worst mages you could have. Although it's not like, I say worse, but it's just in comparison to the other characters and if you're min-maxing. Yeah, there's really no bad job combination in this game, and there's really no character that they're really going to suck trying to do either melee or spellcasting, but Vaan's ultimately has better stats for being a mage, so give him white magic. I didn't know what to do with Balthier, but then it hit me. Foe Breaker is a class that is designed to enfeeble enemies by lowering their strength or lowering their defense. And what is Balthier in tactics? He has the ability to enfeeble enemies by stopping their ability to attack or their ability to move. So it hit me. Foe Breaker on Balthier with Machinist is like, that's him in tactics. That is literally his tactics version. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, that's it. You're doing that. Otherwise, I have Ash running Knight and Time Battle Mage because she has time magic in Revenant Wings, so that's canon there. And I can't really picture using Ash without a sword and shield, just because that's just her for me. Bosch running Bushi and Ulan. Bushi is just like, he's a samurai. He lives to serve. That is the one sentence definition for Bosch's character throughout the entire game. So if I had to make him a Bushi, and then he works fairly well as an Ulan, and Ulan helps to bolster samurai, since katana requires both magic and physical strength in order to maximize its damage. That was sort of my spread, trying to make sure that every character had, ideally at least both jobs, but at least one job that sort of fit them, either based on the weapon that they are sort of canonly shown to be using, or their role. Bosch is a loyal knight, so he gets. I was going to make him Bushi and knight, but I had to give it to Ash. I just couldn't let her not have swords. So yeah, and that took me a while. I had an entire sheet of paper where I had written back and front various different job combinations, trying to figure out who I was going to put on what job. And then once I figured out the job, trying to figure out what espers I'm going to give people, because another sort of nice thing with the license board in this game is that you have various different skills on each board that are locked behind either espers or quickenings. So you have to be strategic about which quickenings you unlock based on the job combinations, and then you also have to be strategic about who you give the espers. I mean, in the original version, it made no difference who you gave to an esper, because they were always on the edge of the board, nothing behind them. It was just sort of I think that Ash should have this summon because reasons, I don't know. But here, you got to think about, what do I want to give these characters? Like, for instance, Monk can get access to some high-level healing magic. So I do actually have Pinello will eventually be able to heal, but most of it is locked behind access to two of the late-game espers, Zodiark and Chaos. So she won't actually get that until I can beat those espers. But it's the whole sort of planning things out that was really a cool experience.
Well put.
Yeah, it's always an interesting. That was an interesting change, I thought, because some of the quickenings too. When in OG12, I would try to go for quickenings as quickly as possible because they're limit breaks. Need to get I want the better limit breaks, but here.
Then they would also give you more MP when you unlock them.
Yeah, right. But in this game, they're tied to their own separate bar, which I think is an improvement because I don't like draining MP in order to use them. And they block, like you said, they block off certain skills or weapons, but sometimes and then you have to weigh the odds of okay, so this quickening. Getting quickenings is always sequential. You'll always get the part of the character's first one, their second one, and then their third one. Some of them are more expensive than others. You'll be okay, so I want Bosch's level 3 quickening. Well, I could get it on this tile for only 100 license points, but then I'm going to block off this weapon, so maybe I should go for the 125 license point one instead. It's just an interesting little wrinkle to character building that I kind of appreciate.
And I agree. Having the quickenings and the summons be their own separate bar and not tied to your MP was a huge change, and another reason why it's actually fun to use espers now, because I hardly ever used quickenings in the original version because I wasn't willing to sacrifice all of my MP to do maybe, a decent amount of damage if RNG was on my side and I was able to do a long quickening chain. That has not changed in the game, and I still find it a little frustrating when you run out of time, but at least you're not wasting any resources by doing it. You build up your chain, your bar to use quickenings and summons by dealing damage and taking damage. So that's a much more natural kind of limit break progression than the original game did. And it definitely, I've been using quickenings a lot more already in this playthrough than I ever did in any playthrough combined of the original version. So I give major props to whoever said, let's do that.
I was just gonna say, I'm going for I'm trying to get the concurrence trophy, and I do get really frustrated with the time limit and the randomness of quickenings because
How many do you need for the trophy?
You need to see all of them. You need to see
Woof.
Yeah.
every different one, and the last one I think the last two, the best ones, require you to get 3 and 4 of each kind of quickening sequentially. Well, not like 1 2 1 1 1 2 2 2 3 3, but like you need 3 1s, 3 2s, and 3 3s in your chain. And if you go too far over, they'll actually reset and it'll do a lower level one. So it's like you have to be really specific about it. And yeah, I'm just like.
I was afraid that you were going to say it was like a 20 quickening chain or something.
I think the highest I've gotten is 13, but it's that's a frustrating little wrinkle. I'm like, I want the trophy, dang it. So I have to make this hard.
I think it's still quickenings are still a very baffling system. They don't seem that well implemented. I'm not really sure what they were trying to do with that. But like until you mentioned it, I'd completely forgotten that it was tied to MP before, and like I just like had like a post-traumatic stress flashback of just like losing MP. But yeah, it's such a great move that they put in like a limit break bar this time. I mean, quickenings have won me so many boss battles when I've been, at the skin of my teeth playing Zodiac Age. So that indeed is a very welcome change, and one that I didn't notice until just now.
And they can be useful strategy too, because concurrences, even the lowest level one, will hit all enemies. So you can there are strategies for bosses where they start you with a bunch of ads. Like for instance, when you fight Vossler, he's got some buddies with him. When you fight Judge Bergen, he starts off with a couple of random lowlings behind him that you have to take care of. You can do a quickening chain right off the bat, and as long as you hit 3 quickenings, and you should, as long as everyone has at least one, you get a concurrence, and you can easily wipe out all of the ads and focus on the boss. That's what I did when I fought Mateus in the Social Run of Miriam. Is I just immediately let off with a quickening chain, and all of his little iceling, whatever they were, died instantly. So. But yes,
I found it very helpful the end of the Elder Worm fight, where you keep going through those rounds of worsening status effects when you hit certain thresholds. And when I got down to the last one, I was like, right, no, let's just end this right now, and just like pulled off a quickening chain and circumvented that whole like final awful leg of that battle.
Yeah, it's nice, and it's especially nice when you can do a long one and they do a lot of damage. Sometimes, if RNG is not lucky, you'll pull it off, and it will take off a sizable chunk, but it's nothing you probably couldn't have shaved off in the same amount of time just by normal attacks.
Yeah.
I did have an insane luck with the Judge Bergen fight where I did a quickening chain, a really good one, and I one-shotted him.
Whoa.
Him and all of his little friends. I don't know how I did that, but I did.
Sick.
But enough about gameplay mechanics. Let's talk more about the world and the characters. So, 12, of course, takes place in Ivalice, and this is not the first time that we've seen Ivalice, but it is, in some respects, one of the most beautiful renditions of it, being in full 3D and getting to see all these different sort of biomes throughout the Ivalice, from the deserts to the jungles to the icy mountains to the swamps. But beyond even just 12, when I think about Final Fantasy and all the different worlds that it's shown us, I mean, Ivalice is, for the longest time, Ivalice was the only world where we had multiple games that were taking place in that same world, and we've sort of, with 10-2 and with the 13 trilogy, we've had multiple games in the same world. But this is a really interesting thing that Final Fantasy does with Ivalice, bridging between PS1 game to a PS2 game to DS was the
GBA,
the Tactics Advance, or GBA.
Yeah, GBA and
oh my
DS
gosh.
sequel.
Yeah, so lots of different games over different systems, but all sort of tangentially connected, as it were, by being in this same place. So what do we think about Ivalice as a Final Fantasy world? Is it sort of the best realized Final Fantasy world in terms of just, having multiple games and multiple different takes on that world, or even just the Ivalice of Final Fantasy XII? What do we think about how Ivalice is presented to us in 12?
I don't know if I would go so far to say it's the best realized setting in the series, because I'm kind of I'm full disclosure, I'm kind of a sucker for Seven's world. I think they did something really cool with that, for that blend of modern and fantasy, and I think they've been trying to chase that ever since, and it hasn't worked. With 12, though, I love the more political slant of Mitsuno's work, that kind of more serious traditional fantasy element he's got going. I love the lore of 12 in particular. I think the fact that the game takes such pains to make its world feel so richly detailed is nice, even if a lot of that is kind of like tucked away. I ignored hunting for the most part my first playthrough. I didn't go after any of the optional espers. I'm doing some of that now in my Zodiac Age playthrough, and I'm just floored by how much I missed. I'm just like, oh my god, there's like a whole second game in here. And as for Ivalice as a whole, I do enjoy the setting very much. I do think there's a bit of a missing link in Ivalice. I really wish, because I've seen I've looked at the unofficial timeline of the series, where it's so somewhere between 12 and Tactics there was some kind of Holocaust level event that wiped out the Mughals and all these other races.
That's like a retcon, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing is the Ivalice of Tactics is very different from the Ivalice of the Ivalice Alliance games. And 12 is this weird kind of middle ground between the two, where it's and maybe that speaks to the game's development and Matsuno leaving, I'm not sure, but it feels like they were caught between, we want to make 12 a serious, mature fantasy game with Yasuni Matsuno, and we're making the next number at Final Fantasy. We have to make this as marketable as possible, and which is what led to Vaan and a few other weird concessions the game makes. And the result is an interesting blend of the two styles that works for the most part really well, but it's still kind of not quite. It doesn't quite gel for me. It just, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of nitpicking, I know, but I do feel like there's a bit of a discrepancy in how the setting's portrayed between games, and enough that it bothers me.
Well, part of that is simply we had Tactics Ivalice, and then we came in, 10 years later and had to make another game, and it was set before, and it was we knew it was going to be in the same Ivalice, but it couldn't be in the world of Tactics Ivalice. So yeah. What do? You have to sort of explain how you've got races like the Sikh and the Banga that are nowhere to be seen in, at least in original Tactics. So there's that, although what is that? I never played either of the Tactics Advance. One of them is not it's not real Ivalice. One of them is
Well, that's the thing.
I think that's both of them.
Yeah, that's what's weird about Ivalice as a setting to me. This is. I thank you for reminding me of that. That actually kind of hits the nail on the head for what bugs me about it. Because the Ivalice in the storybook that's in both Tactics games, Tactics Advance games, is apparently Ivalice. Apparently, no, it actually is the setting of Ivalice. They're transported to the fictitious ? World of Ivalice, and I don't know. It just paints the other games in the series. It's really weird looking at Ivalice as a serious setting, as this is an established Final Fantasy universe with this rich lore and history, when two of the games are self-proclaimed fan fiction.
It's really it really undercut the setting to turn it into the never-ending story in Tactics Advance 1 anyway. Tactics Advance 2 really didn't have that much story, if I remember correctly.
No, it didn't at all.
I mean, I guess in true Final Fantasy fashion, the worlds in these games, the Final Fantasy is constantly reinventing itself, and the Ivalice setting is no different. It is, it's different takes on this world with shared characteristics across this series of 4, maybe 5 games if you want to count Vagrant Story, but I understand that's kind of anomalous, and that wasn't really intended to be an Evil East game originally. Although Final Fantasy XII has like the most well-realized like geopolitics-driven storyline out of all of the mainline games, I really was hoping for something more, a little bit more along the lines of Tactics, the original Tactics, or Vagrant Story, or even Tactics Ogre. You know, I mean, there's the bones of a really suspenseful, like political, Game of Thrones-esque thriller there. And although there is quite a bit of that, and it is quite satisfying, there is also long portions where you're just chasing after magical rocks. You know? Those
Zodiac stones. Damn them!
Take a shot every time someone says nethicite.
Yeah, I can't vibe with the nethicite and the shards.
Nethicite, diaffected nethicite, manufactured nethicite, dawn shard, midlight shard, dusk shard.
Bodied blastia and phonons.
Oh my god.
Orbments.
Oh, and then Orbments. Yes, thank you. I was just going to say.
Thank you.
Going to say Kiseki does it too.
To be fair, it is kind of a JRPG thing, and people will be like, for a Matsuno game, the 12 is just, the story hinges around magic crystals, and I'm just like, Tactics does the same thing.
Yeah, it does.
Problem there too. Except, I mean, the Lucavi are at least interesting. I do think the actual plot of 12 is fairly interesting now that I think about it, with Ash basically having a magical weapon of mass destruction in her hand, like for most of the game. But
the acting goes a long way for me, and that really makes me. It does a very good job on making me very enthusiastic about what is largely a MacGuffin-driven plot.
MacGuffins. That's another thing. It's like we can't have RPGs without MacGuffins nowadays. So let's talk about the cast. We haven't in this playthrough anyway. We haven't played through the entire game, so we can't really. I mean, we can because we've all played it before, but I kind of want us to hold off on talking about the revelations in the second half of the game, for those who might be playing along with us, maybe for the first time, or a second. Anyway, but up through like the midpoint of the game, which is where the infamous road trip from hell to get to Arcades happens, right at the start of that huge trek. How are we feeling about the cast? And in particular, I'm really interested to hear, have your opinions about not just Vaan, of course, but like any of the main cast that we've met, even NPCs. Have your opinions changed at all about them since you first played the game?
I don't know if they changed so much, to be honest. I did like this cast very much the first time around. I still do. I don't love Vaan because I didn't love Tidus, and he's like Aladdin Tidus, and that just doesn't do anything for me. However, I mean, you've got such strong characters. Actually, now that you mention it, I really loved Balthier the first time around. And that's no different now. I still love Balthier, but I've kind of realized that he's kind of meant to be a bit of a doofus that I didn't really pick up on before. He's got this swagger that he's not as smooth as he thinks he is. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that at the time. And now I still appreciate him very much, but like noticing him like not getting it sometimes, and like going out of his way to play it cool and like try to hide the fact that he's got a more nuanced set of morals than he pretends to just be like the roguish thief, and seeing him kind of like grapple with this as like maybe a way of coping with a sort of insecurity, I think is a very fun way to read his character.
Yeah, I'm actually finding that I'm liking Balthier a lot more than I did when I first played through the game. I mean, I didn't dislike him in the original version. I just didn't quite go for his suave swagger that he had going on, and the whole I'm the leading man BS that he would constantly, which is ironic if you think about it, even, not in context of the game world, but just like he is not the lead. No, you're not. You're like the third leading man, because Ash and Bosch are really more integral to the plot than you are. But
you are a man and you are there.
Yes.
I do think that's one quirk of his I really enjoy, though. I think it's a funny gag.
It is, yeah. But I like him. I like him a lot more now. I don't know what it is. If it's one of those things where it's like, my tastes have matured a little bit, and maybe I'm finding myself a little bit more won over by his suaveness. And of course, Gideon Emery could read the phone book to me, and I would probably be like,
he has a very smexy voice.
It does. So I played this game when I was in college, and I understood the themes well enough, but I also think that I've had some life experiences, and I've had exposure to various different forms of media that have sort of informed my understandings and have made me go back and look at things that I used to either really like or not like, and sort of give it a second glance. And I feel like I'm kind of doing that with 12, even though I am the biggest defender that I know of this game and all of its quirks and its eccentricities. I'm still finding myself realizing things that I didn't quite pick up on when I first played the game, and I'm finding myself finding characters like Balthier more interesting than I think I originally gave them credit for. So I think that's neat, even for someone like me, who's like a self-professed, super fan, to be able to come back and say, you know what? That's kind of interesting. I didn't really think about it that way, but now that I do, I can't unsee it. The benefits of time, ladies and gentlemen. Mm-hmm. So, Peter, what about you? How awesome are Vaan's new abs?
His new abs are such an improvement. They no longer look like they've been sprayed on. He no longer has the Zack Snyder abs, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so truth be told, I don't hate Vaan as much as I used to, although I still strongly dislike him. I also play as him all the time because just a thing. I need to play as the main character of whatever game I'm playing as, and he is who you play as in most of the cities. I think Vaan and Pinello are both they feel like they'd be side characters in any other game, and their role in the story is kind of truncated. Now I appreciate the perspective that Vaan offers on what it's like living under Imperial rule. At the same time, I just don't. The fact that Vaan even straight up admits half the time, it's I'm just along for the ride. It's yeah, why are you still here, actually? It's your brother, the Avenged Brother plot is kind of his thing, but it's also kind of flimsy. And it's just compared to how rich the other characters are, playing it now, I love how fully realized characters like Balthier and Bosch are, and their motives are realistic. Their personas are varied and complex. They have interesting interactions. Ash is my girl. She's the best. I don't have any great affection for Fran, for female Chewbacca, but I mean, she's there. She's a bunny lady. That's cool, I guess.
I like her stoic, quite self-serious. She's a lady of few words.
Yeah, she's she's
it works for me.
And the VR are kind of evil. He says elves or whatever, and I like her little subplot. I think I like that chunk of the story. I think is actually really interesting. Mm-hmm. But
I like her voice acting a lot.
Yeah, her voice acting is great.
Yes,
really good job with that. Localization, A plus is all around. And this isn't a problem with the localization. I think it's it's a problem with the game itself. The cinematography and sound quality, the quality of the audio itself, and the fact that I think dialogue cuts a little too quickly in a lot of scenes, especially those scenes with the judges and Arcades. They have the best dialogue, but their scenes are so brief and cut so weirdly. It's you hardly have time to get a feel for them. They're
very tightly paced. Yeah, maybe a little bit too tight.
Yeah,
but notice too many problems with the blocking. But you definitely don't have to spend enough time with them.
Yeah, well, the particular the scene with Gabranth and Drace.
Drace.
Yeah, right before the Bergen fight. That scene in particular, I'm just thinking they seem like they jumped from three different. The scene happens so quickly, and a lot happens in that scene. Like the death of Emperor Gramus, and Drace is suddenly like being executed on the spot, and Gabrant has to do it to prove his loyalty to Vane, and all this interesting political stuff. But it's just like the scene's like what, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I don't know. I feel like that should have more room to sink in, and we've only known Drace for one other scene. But
yeah, she really stole that scene, and it really left me wanting more from her.
She did, yeah. Yeah. The judges are fantastic. I would like to spend more time with them. That's really my only like real problem. I think the secondary characters in 12 are super interesting, but don't get enough screen time.
Yeah, I think that's probably chalked up to the triple development cycle.
Yeah, they probably had a lot of concepts on the floor that were like, okay, now what do we do with these?
I'd love to see the lore Bible for that game.
Oh, yes.
Me too.
Give me a day, Square Enix. That's all I need.
The audio quality is just a huge bugbear for me. It's the one of the things that I really had a hard time dealing with in the original game, because I played the Japanese version does not have that issue, at least not that I recall. I do not recall the quality of the audio to be as bad as it was in the original version, and they've done a little to clear it up and have it sound a little bit better, but it's ultimately it's a Band-Aid on a much bigger wound that would have required them probably re-recording in order to fix, and they can't do that. So they did the best they could. But it's most pronounced with the ladies, especially in the original version. Anything that Ash or Penelo said sounded like 10 times worse than anything the guy said, and it's because of the higher pitch of the voices sort of exacerbates the problems with the quality of the recording. And that's an unfortunate thing. I'm not even sure if we ever got an actual explanation for why that was. I think the thing that comes to mind is that there was more dialogue, more voice acting in the Western version of the game than in the original, because all of those little scenes, like say for instance where they have just arrived at the Sand Sea and Bosch is telling them how they'll get to Wraithwall's tomb, that isn't voiced in the original Japanese version. It's just a cut. It's just a text that you progress through in the game. And there's a bunch of scenes like that where they're voiced in our version and they weren't voiced in the original. And one thing comes to mind is that maybe they had to compress the audio more in order to get all that to fit on the disc, which is unfortunate. I still like that those scenes are voiced, but it's unfortunate. And, of course, that space shouldn't really have been an issue with the PS4 version, but again, it probably would have necessitated re-recording in order to really fix it. So and it's unfortunate. It does sound better, I guess, in comparison, but it is still kind of noticeable when you're playing through the game, especially if you're wearing headphones. It's like, it sounds better when you don't have headphones on, because you can't, headphones, you have that audio right in your ear, and it's a lot easier to hear all the different nuances and the quality of the mastering itself. So, yeah, which is why I try to play this game without headphones if I can get away with it.
I play it a lot on the exercise bike, so like a lot of the more delicate nuances of the sound is like drowned out by my spinning wheel anyway. So I didn't notice that the audio quality was quite that bad. And that's something that I would usually notice. But yeah, I admit that I haven't tried headphones with this game yet.
Yeah, it is what it is, so you just have to, it's one of its many eccentricities, I guess you could say, is the audio quality. I definitely, I get and I agree with Peter about the speed at which some of the cutscenes progress. That cutscene in particular is a pretty big offender, just because of how many different things are happening, and then it's almost like one person says something and then immediately the next person says, and they may even be talking over each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, on the one hand, I mean, I would have to go back and rewatch these scenes in Japanese to compare. I'm thinking it's still pretty fast, even in Japanese, just because of the way, like you said, the scenes are blocked. But I wonder if, the fanciful language that they injected with the localization probably didn't hurt, or probably didn't help, rather. I mean, I don't think that they did it so badly that contributes and that makes it the problem. But I could see how having to get these phrases into that sort of more old English high fantasy kind of talk, the various different changes they make to grammar or to set phrases in order to make it sound high fantasy, it may have affected the wordiness rather that's going on there. So again, I mean, downside, but for that amazing localization, which still to this day, just in terms of like the quality of the script itself, I think is still kind of if not one, is still one of the best, high bar gold standards in terms of localizing a script and having it localized in a way that enhances the world building and the lore of the game, and it helps to sort of make it feel more like a setting, and not just language that we're using to tell a story.
This was an Alexander S. Smith localization, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
He's so incredible. I love him so much.
Yes. There have been interviews with him that you should definitely check out if you're at all interested in the process that went into the localization of this game. It's really cool to see him talk about any of his projects, not even just 12, but the amount of thought that went into something that you wouldn't really even have. I think most of us probably wouldn't have given a second thought, like what accents do we want these various different people to have? They legit thought about, and that's why in the English version we've got noticeable different dialects for people based on where they're from. So like there's the British. I don't know my different British dialects. Rob, you might be able to help with that. But there's the definite sort of British feel to the Arcadians. The Bergerbans are more of a kind of an Indian feel to their speech.
I was actually my co-host of my podcast, Alva, actually informed me that the Bergerbans do sound Indian, but that is in fact a Welsh accent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I did not know. So I was very, very surprised to learn that.
Interesting. Well,
very
I learned
Welsh
something
accent
there. But yeah, I mean, like, that's cool to think that they thought about this when they were casting, when they were recording, to have these different people have different dialects. And I mean, that's just a neat little thing to make the world feel more like a real place, because that happens. I mean, you have different dialects in different areas. So, and we were talking about Fran and how they specifically wanted her to have kind of an Icelandic sound to her voice. Bjork gets mentioned by name in some of the interviews I've seen as sort of an inspiration for her voice. Yeah. So
wear it on their sleeves.
So I mean, it's cool, and I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with the Japanese voice acting. I quite like it, and there are a handful of voices that I do kind of still prefer in the original Japanese. I love Bosch to death, but there's parts of me that actually, I feel like Keith Ferguson was a little too gruff sometimes. And that, again, that might be part of the audio quality rubbing in, because I'm sure that exasperates that kind of sound more. But the Japanese voice acting is great. It's beautiful. It's still good, but it doesn't have that sort of element that they threw into it that sort of actually aids the lore and the setting of the game by something as simple as, say, let's have this person talk a little differently than that person. I say this, and it's been a long time since I played the Japanese version, so maybe my memory is, of course, a little bit out of whack. But that was what I recall.
This is an observation that I've heard from numerous other people about the Japanese version, that like it really didn't do the dialect thing, and that is an edge that Alexander Smith's localization has over it, or so I've heard.
So it's good. It's very good. There, audio problems and wordy cutscenes aside, it's good. So, I mean, I think the subtitle for Final Fantasy XII is, it's good, but, there's always little caveats with this game, is that it does great things, but then there are other things in which you're kind of like, and maybe that's just kind of like, that's Final Fantasy for you in general, because you could probably say the same about
for sure
every other Final Fantasy.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm looking over some stuff from the game too, and I forgot about Alcid for a second, and I'm just like, why are you even in this game?
Ezio.
Oh God, he's terrible.
He's so flamboyant.
His design
is terrible. Like, why does he have sunglasses?
What? Yes, why?
Why does he have? That's it's so out of place. And then his voice like changes every line he speaks. But I do wish we got to see a little bit more of Rosaria, because they're kind of just the other empire that exists, so we can have a war. Alas.
It would have been cool if, like, since you go to Arcades, it would have been cool that you would also go to Rosaria and see Rosaria.
Yeah, like Alcid shows up and is like, "Hey, we gotta discuss the terms of the thing. Let's go. Come on. Time's wasting." Yeah, overall, I agree with pretty much everything you guys have said. I think 12 is a wonderful game that has a few chinks in the armor, but like it's clear that a lot of love and attention to detail went to this game, and like given Final Fantasy's penchant recently for tumultuous development cycles, it's kind of a miracle it turned out as good as it did. Because
isn't it?
Yeah, we could have had another 13 or another 15, where it's like, these are fun games and all. Shut up, they're both fun.
Yeah, the 12 feels so cohesive in comparison to, as you said, 13 or 15. Yeah. There is a consistent world there, whereas 13 is really kitchen sink between that trilogy, and then 15 is just a few games stitched together. So 12 feels very, very whole in a way that I guess if mainline Final Fantasy hasn't since. I can't weigh in on 14. I haven't played any of that, but I hear wonderful things from all of you.
Oh, you should.
I know. I've downloaded the trial, and I made a Lalafell, and then I got overwhelmed because the world was so big and I was so small. I just had to turn off the PlayStation and cry myself to sleep.
You made a potato.
Yeah.
I punt potatoes.
What?
I'm a member of Mikote Master Race, so No, I take that back. We're not the master race. We just apparently reproduce like rabbits, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Yeah, there are probably way too many cat people in 14. Like, sorry, but cats are the best.
You don't die, you multiply.
I guess.
Maybe
like
kids.
We're cats. We have 9 lives, right? So, but that's a different game. Although I think there's an interesting comparison to make between 12 and 14, but that would probably be a different podcast. And we've talked a lot already, I think, about 12, and we still have more to talk. We'll have another episode coming up once we have beaten the game, and so we'll have some end game story, character, final thoughts. We'll talk about side quests and gotta catch them espers, all of them. I need to have all of them, and of course, if we're brave enough, maybe we'll even talk about killing the optional super bosses that the game has. But that will be on our next episode, so please look forward to that, as Square is so fond of saying. So to close out the episode, I want to, of course, give a big thanks to Peter and Robert for joining me.
Thank you for hosting.
So some short little wrap-up news. Obviously, this is episode 101, so Retro recently hit episode 100. Yay! I would like clap, but it might sound like I don't want to be like, too loud. So yes, Retro is 100. If you haven't checked that episode out, please do. We've got a lot of people that were on that episode to just sort of gush about how much we like Retro and how much fun it is. So please do check that out, and just it's a nice milestone to say we're now 100.
Life begins at 100,
right? Like 100 is the new 30, is what I'm hearing. I guess
that sounds like a Final Fantasy game for you.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing if everyone's like over 100 years old.
Yeah, you thought Bosch was too old? Think again. It's Matsuno's revenge.
The first boss is just getting out of bed and getting to your front door, and then the next boss is trying to stay awake past like 8 p.m. at night.
The victory theme plays if you don't break your hip.
That would be fun. But Retro Encounters 100, awesome. We have finally decided on the October game. It's going to be Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga, so look forward to that in October.
Roll up Embryon. Assemble.
Yes. It should be good. As always, you can get in touch with us any one of a number of ways. You can email us at retro@rpgfan.com. Send us your thoughts, your suggestions. If you're playing Final Fantasy XII along with us, feel free to, talk about anything, really. Talk about how awesome Vaan's new abs are, and what you think maybe of, say, the new reorchestrated music, which we didn't talk about this episode, but I am going to make sure we talk about it next time. You can, of course, also chat with us on the boards, talk with us there, and chat at us on Twitter and the social medias. And real quick, guys, where can people find you on, say, Twitter?
You can find me, Peter Triezenberg, at I Have Fury on Twitter, same as my board name on the boards, and you can get exclusive access to my inane thoughts on the latest Game of Thrones episode or something. I don't know.
Rob, what about you?
You can find me maxing and relaxing on twitter.com at misanthrobob, as always.
And you can find me on Twitter at Leon Kazero. I know, I pronounce it weird. I don't even know why. I think it was just because I was like 10 years old and thought it was cool. Leon Kazero, same name on the boards, of course. And finally, as always, please subscribe and review us on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. We'd love to have more people listening to us, and we love to get your thoughts, and it helps other people find the show and play along with us. And that's really the point and the goal and the fun part of the show, is being able to play awesome RPGs and talk about them with awesome people. So do all those things. Play more Final Fantasy XII if you've been playing along with us, and join us for our next episode where we wrap up Final Fantasy XII. And good night.
Peace, everybody.
Ta-ta.
Don't listen to Andor's lies.
I'm Bosch von Ronsenberg of Dalmasca.
Bosch lives.